Lemuel Gulliver, a ship's surgeon and a lover of adventure, had traveled far and wide across the seas. One day, as his ship sailed through a terrible storm, it was destroyed by the raging waves, and Gulliver was cast ashore. When he awoke, he found himself in a strange land. The trees around him were no taller than his knees, and the flowers bloomed like giant plates. But the most surprising sight was the tiny people, no taller than 6 inches, who were scrambling around, afraid of him. Before Gulliver could react, the little people had bound him to the ground with ropes. He was completely helpless, unable to move. As he lay there, struggling to understand what was happening, the Lilliputians began to gather around, their fear evident on their faces. Some of them raised tiny weapons, bows and arrows, pointing them at him. Gulliver tried to speak to them, but his voice was so loud that it made them panic even more. The little people had never seen anyone so enormous, and they had no idea whether he was a threat or just an oddly shaped creature. As the commotion grew, the Emperor of Lilliput arrived with his royal guards. The Emperor, a tiny man dressed in splendid robes, stood before Gulliver, and after a long discussion with his advisors, decided to imprison him. They constructed a large cage to hold the giant, and with great effort they managed to place him inside. Though Gulliver could have easily broken free, he decided to stay calm and let the Lilliputians decide how best to handle the situation. Days passed, and the Lilliputians began to grow accustomed to his presence. They brought him food and water, and children came to stare through the bars of his cage, amazed by the giant. As Gulliver spent more time in their land, he began to communicate with the Lilliputians using simple gestures, and over time, they began to trust him. King Emulus, the tiny emperor, decided to release Gulliver from his cage. He explained that their kingdom was in great danger. For years, Lilliput had been at war with their neighboring kingdom of Blefuscu, and the Blefuscu army was preparing to invade. King Emulus, desperate for help, asked Gulliver to aid them. Gulliver, still unsure of the full situation, agreed to help. The Lilliputians, though small, had a clear plan. They explained that their army was too tiny and weak to defend against the Blefuscu forces. The Blefuscudians had larger ships and stronger weapons, and the Lilliputians had no chance in battle unless they had someone as strong as Gulliver on their side. Together they made their way to the shore, where Gulliver saw the Blefuscu fleet on the horizon. The Blefuscudians had already begun firing their cannons and arrows at him, but Gulliver was hardly affected by their weapons. The small arrows bounced off his skin, and the cannons made no dent in his armor-like body. He smiled, knowing that he could help them without causing harm. Gulliver waded into the water, and with each step, the waves grew larger. He bent down and began lifting the Blefuscu ships from the water one by one, like toys. The Blefuscu soldiers aboard screamed in panic, realizing they had no way to defend themselves. Gulliver tossed the ships into the air, sending them crashing far away, out of sight. The Blefuscu fleet was completely defeated. The Lilliputians cheered in triumph, celebrating their victory over the invaders. King Emulus and his advisors rushed to thank Gulliver for his bravery. The emperor declared a feast in his honor, and the tiny people decorated the town with flowers and lights. Princess Florella, the emperor's daughter, personally thanked Gulliver and gave him a golden key as a token of their gratitude. "You have saved us, Gulliver," the princess said. "Our kingdom will never forget what you've done for us." Though Gulliver was honored, he knew his time in Lilliput had come to an end. He had helped the tiny kingdom, but he knew there were more lands to explore, more adventures to experience. He bid farewell to the Lilliputians, promising to return one day. As he sailed away, Gulliver looked back at the tiny kingdom, his heart filled with pride. He had made a real difference in their world, and his journey was far from over.